My dad held me down while I swallowed pills that destroyed my voice forever, saying women's voices were too powerful and needed to be weakened. When Mom begged him not to surgically remove my vocal cords, he grabbed her throat and said, "One more word and you'll be next." I just stared at him. That was months ago. Yesterday, he called me 47 times, begging me to testify that he never hurt us. When I was 10, my father made me swallow a med that damaged my vocal cords because he said women's voices were too powerful and needed to be weakened to protect men from temptation. My parents came from a community that believed women's voices could control men's minds if left at full strength. So once girls hit puberty, they underwent a softening ceremony where they took medication that permanently reduced their voices to whispers. That way, they couldn't manipulate men with their dangerous feminine tones. I had 3 older sisters who already spoke in barely audible rasps, leaning close to be heard while my brothers shouted freely across rooms. Mom had been whispering for 30 years, and Dad would mock her when she struggled to call us for dinner. "Speak up, dear," he'd laugh, knowing she physically couldn't. "Oh wait, you can't. Good thing too, or you might bewitch me into doing the dishes." I'd never heard her real voice, and I grew up knowing same torture was coming for me. "Girls who keep their full voices become whores," my dad told me once. "They seduce men just by talking. You'll thank me for protecting you." After I got my first period, Dad held my softening ceremony. He held up the small white med like it was communion and said, "Today you become a woman, which means your voice must be tamed before it grows too powerful." My younger brother watched excitedly while my older sister sat silent, having learned that even whispering too much made their throats bleed. Dad handed me water and watched me swallow the med. I tried to run, but my older brothers held me down. I wasn't allowed any water until I gave in and took the med. I lasted a day and a half before I gave in. Within hours, my throat was on fire. By the next morning, I could only whisper forever. Living voiceless was hell. My sisters and I couldn't call for help if we were hurt. We couldn't sing, laugh properly, or speak on phones. My sisters taught me to communicate through gestures, written notes, and getting close enough to people that they could hear our destroyed voices. School was sitting in the kitchen while Dad droned on about lessons I couldn't ask questions about because he couldn't hear my whispers from across the table. My brothers would pretend not to understand us just to make us repeat ourselves until our throats bled. What I missed most was singing. Before the med, I'd loved music, but now even humming made my damaged cords seize up. I'd lie in bed trying to remember what my real voice had sounded like, but after just weeks, I'd forgotten. Sometimes I'd catch Mom touching her throat with this lost expression, and I knew she was trying to remember too. The real cruelty was that the med didn't just make us whisper. It made speaking physically painful. Every word scraped like sandpaper. By evening, most of us went completely silent, communicating through looks and gestures. Dad loved this, calling it peaceful and proper. He'd have loud conversations with my brothers while we sat mute at the dinner table, unable to participate even if we wanted to. One day, I heard my sister Alice gasping from the bathroom. I found her clutching her throat, blood coming from her mouth. She'd been trying to scream because she'd fallen and dislocated her shoulder, but the effort had torn something in her damaged throat. Dad stood in the doorway shaking his head. "This is what happens when you fight your nature," he said, while Alice silently sobbed. "If you'd accepted your voice's limitations, you wouldn't be bleeding." I snapped. I grabbed paper and wrote furiously that she needed a hospital, that her shoulder was clearly dislocated. Dad laughed at my hysteria and said she just needed rest. I tried to call 911, but my whisper was too quiet for the dispatcher to hear. I had to watch my sister suffer in silence for hours until Dad finally decided she'd learned her lesson and took her for medical help. That night, I started researching our medicine. The pills didn't start as a religious tradition. They were veterinary steroids meant for livestock, known to cause permanent vocal cord paralysis in humans. My father had been poisoning us with animal substances. I wrote everything down and planned to take it to the police, but Dad must have been watching my internet history. The next morning, he woke me early. His